Welcome to the Good Success Podcast, where we encourage and challenge purpose-driven entrepreneurs to create, build, and maintain profitable businesses so they can have more to give more. Our motto is to be a conduit, not a bucket. Work to have to give. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Good Success Podcast. I am your host, Tom Olson, and today I have got a super special guest today. His name is Neal Bawa, and he's from Grow Capitus. And I've seen this guy speak on stage. I've seen him. He's been around for a long time. You know, normally I kind of don't get bogged down into people's bios. I really don't, but I just figured today, you know, this guy is a very impressive bio, and there's no way I'm going to be able to memorize all this. So I just figured, hey, I'm going to read most of this. Probably won't get to it all because I could probably be here for days if I told you all the things that Neal has done. So Neal Bawa is a technologist who has been universally known in the real estate circles as the Mad Scientist of Multifamily. So hopefully, you know, today we're not going to have a bunch of, smoke coming out of his ears. But just so you guys know, he's been known as the Mad Scientist of Multifamily. Besides being in one of the most demand speakers in the commercial real estate space, Neal is really, he's a data-driven guru. And, I don't really like that word guru too much. It's kind of, almost like a dirty word to some people, but really like he is, I love when people are data-driven because it helps them know what truly is. And if we don't really look at data, we don't have a good sense of what the data is telling us. We don't really know what to do. And I love people that take apart the data. Neal treats his $250 million multifamily portfolio as an ongoing experiment in efficiency and optimization. This mad scientist lives by two mantras. I love these two mantras. His first mantra is, we can only manage what we can measure. And I love that statement. It's excellent. I've heard it many times. His second mantra is, data beats gut feeling by a million miles. And if you've been in business for any period of time, you will know that as well. So these mantras and a dozen of other, he believes and they really do disrupt and drive profits for his 300 plus investors. So welcome, Neal, to the show. I appreciate you taking some time and investing in our community today.
Well, thanks for having me on the Good Success Show. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I always kind of lead the podcast with just kind of something that's been on my mind recently. And this year has kind of been one of those years where, even me and Neal, before we started talking on this podcast, he was like, I used to speak at all these places and now I'm kind of doing some of these virtually, so this year's been just a weird year. And I just, obviously I don't have to point it out that this year's been a weird year, but I just want to take this time today to encourage everybody to go and find those people that you appreciate. It's something that we do in our mastermind. Every single time you come to the Good Success Mastermind, I just stop everything for 5 minutes and I say, hey, who do you appreciate? What are you thankful for? And maybe we'll have people go around the room and just, raise your hands and say, hey, what are you thankful for? We actually do this. I do this with my kids on the way to church all the time. I say, hey, let's go around a couple rounds on the way to church and let's say, hey, what are you thankful for, Lily? What are you thankful for, Edie? What are you thankful for, Becky, my wife, and Zach? And, we just kind of go around, and really at the end of doing that a couple times, and I don't do it for this purpose. I don't do it to feel good myself, but after doing this 2 or 3 times and you start thinking, wow, like we really do have some good things. And I really have some great people in my life that I'm thankful for. I just want to encourage you today to take note, take 5 minutes and just ponder, think about it, reflect about the people in your life that you're thankful for, and then take action on it. Write them a letter. I love handwritten letters. I was taught by an old, salesman, statesman salesman. He was like, write handwritten letters with blue ink. I mean, it's like, if you do it, you will really get people's attention. But even a text message or an email, just tell somebody that you're thankful for them today. I promise you, you will not regret it. And that's what we're all about here at Good Success, is living a life that matters, living a life with no regrets. And I want to encourage and challenge you to be a better person every single day. So let's get back to Neal. Thank you so much for spending some time with us at the Good Success community here. And I love hearing from people that are super successful. And obviously you've been super successful. So why don't you just tell us, I gave the bio, so obviously you don't need to hit those top points, but really, why don't you just tell us what you really do, and kind of, who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Well, before I tell you about myself, because what you started off with was so powerful, right? This thought of being thankful. I want to give you a mad scientist idea, if you guys are ready for that. It's early in the interview for the mad scientist.
Wow.
But
I mean, we're getting it right off the beginning. Mad scientist.
Right.
I got my pen and paper ready. I got this mad scientist.
All right. So
idea.
honest answer is, so think about this statement for a moment. It'll seem completely bizarre when it comes out of my mouth. And the statement is that being thankful is a state of mind, right? It's a state of mind, being thankful, because you can be thankful for things that you would never imagine you could be thankful for. So I'm going to say something and then I'll explain why. I'm thankful for COVID. I'm thankful for this. And there are a lot of reasons why I'm thankful for COVID, and I could go on for a while about this, but let me just give you one reason why I'm thankful for COVID. What COVID has done is it has democratized work in the world. And when I mean world, I mean everywhere in the world. I mean Africa, I mean Asia, I mean the United States. I mean every continent on the planet. Everyone's been equally affected by this. It's democratized work. If the thing that was stopping people from working wherever they want to, just like we are on Zoom, right now I'm on Zoom, we're thousands of miles away, we're communicating, we've got crystal clear video. What was stopping people from working and living wherever they wanted? It was 3 million CEOs. So it was 3 million CEOs that at some level were not comfortable with the idea of having remote companies. They didn't know what it would be like. They had preconceived notions that were wrong. They were uncomfortable with being at home. They themselves needed their big egos to be patted by walking around the office and having people kowtow to them. Whatever it might be, it was something that was stopping work from being democratized, even though we've had internet and technology and Zoom for a long time. And what happened is that COVID gave the world's greatest masterclass to 3 million CEOs. All of them one day had to stop whatever the heck they were doing and learn how to run their businesses on Zoom. By doing that, technology jumped 10 to 20 years in a 4-month time frame, and it democratized the world. Now we have Pinterest yesterday canceled a $90 million lease in San Francisco and said, we just simply can't imagine that world anymore. So we're not going to build this headquarters when we have already agreed that 2/3 of our workers are going to work from wherever they are. So now you have this panacea that people have been talking about for years finally come to life, which is, if I love skiing, maybe I live in North Dakota, maybe I live in Provo, Utah, and I work in Austin. And that, people have been talking about it. 6% of the US workforce does work from home. About 12% of the US workforce works from home some part of the time. But I believe that that's going to jump to about 30 or 40% within the next year, because a fundamental change took place. And for that, and all of the incredible benefits that it brings to the United States, right? Whether it's, burning less gas, or, house prices not going crazy because people have to live in San Francisco in a 1-bedroom apartment, all of those benefits, and the fact that people now can live where they want and work where they want, which is an incredible blessing in terms of the quality of life. I'm thankful for COVID.
It's awesome. And, it's interesting you say that. It's one of those things that I told my staff, right, we're in the thick of things. And, one of the things that we do each quarter as we meet with every one of the companies I own is I sit down with the leadership team and I say, what was something good that happened last quarter? We do this every quarter, not just during COVID. But one of those things that, that we happened right after, for us, when we came back to work from COVID, was all the things that we learned. And exactly what you said, there are some things in our business that we found were extremely way more productive not being in the office. Now we're an operations business, so we have construction here, we have rehabbing here, we've got property management. There are some things that are still much better to have an actual location, but we really could clearly tell after that month, and we're in Indiana, so we didn't get shut down for the period of time that some of these other places have, but you're absolutely right. And I am thankful for COVID as well. And we actually did this at the mastermind last time as well. We even had everybody get up. One of the questions that we had them ask and answer was, tell me something good that's come out of COVID. So you're exactly right. Thankfulness and appreciation is a state of mind. So awesome. Thank you for the mad scientist idea that you started out with, but why don't you just kind of get into now and you really I think when it comes to real estate, I think that's really going to change real estate and the whole spectrum of real estate. For the last 10 years, 2005, 2006 to like 2020, it seemed like everybody was moving into the big cities, and we're already seeing it. If you're paying attention and watching where people are moving, it's almost like there's this release that's happened, especially from some of the cities like Chicago and like New York City.
New York and San Francisco, right? San Francisco has lost more rents in the last 4 months than it did in the entire 2008 debacle.
That's insane.
Right? So in 4 months. So I think, it's very visible. And I think that it's good news for second tier cities like Indianapolis and Memphis and Kansas City, those kinds of cities that have really good infrastructure. Some of them have phenomenal quality of life, and there just wasn't that driving reason for people to leave, and now there is. So it's going to be incredible. But anyway, going back to me, right? So I am a technologist. I'm a geek. I'm a dork. I'm very proud of that. And I fell into real estate in reverse through my day job. And in my day job, the CEO of my technology company in 2003 asked me for help to build a campus from scratch for our company. So we weren't building it for a client. There were no investors. We were just building a campus for our custom use. And I was terrified. I was chief operations officer. So I was running the company for the CEO. And I was like, but Paul, I haven't even rehabbed my own house. You want to build a $6 million campus and put me in charge of it? And he's like, no, I'll help you. And he was brilliant. And he
Neal,
helped
you
me
got
so
this.
much.
You got
right?
it.
He was like, yeah, you got this. And I was stupid enough to just kind of listen to that and go, yeah, I think I got this. And after that, the next 1 year from 2003 to 2004 was this incredibly terrifying time when we'd run the company from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and from 6 to 2 was planning and docs and, all of the construction work that we had to do to basically build this campus from scratch. And when it was all said and done, and while it was being done that entire year, I remember bitching and moaning and complaining and screaming and yelling about this is not my job. And once it was done, I haven't stopped thanking him for 16 years. Right? Because what you learn from building something from scratch is something that most syndicators, even in the US, don't learn because, they're just rehabbing existing buildings. And the learning was incredible. And the tax benefits were incredible for us because, we had invested in our own building. And that hooked me onto real estate. And beyond that, my path was tied to data. And I have lots of stories about, where that was. But that's really how I got my start in reverse, in technology. And as a result, even today, where my real estate portfolio is over $300 million managed, I still tell people very bluntly, I'm running a technology company that is successfully masquerading as a real estate company. And that's why our company is different. That's why the community that has gathered around us is very different.
So that's very interesting. A lot of times people kind of get into who they are and what they do first, and you kind of just jumped right into how you got to where you are. And that's a great story. I love hearing people's story and how they actually, and almost every single time what I find is that it's never the way we think it should have been. It's never the way we planned. We think our life is just going to be a straight line, and we think we're going to go from right here to success. And at the end of the day, if we ever find success, we find it's never a straight line. It's always a squiggly line. And sometimes we got to take a couple steps backwards to get there. So that's great. You said one of those words that, like, as a business owner, I just cringe. You said that's not my job. And, whenever I hear that, I just want to just like scream and be like, no, don't ever tell me that that's not your job.
Yeah, it stops growth, right? And if he hadn't kept pushing and saying, no, we're going to do this, I think I would have gotten away with it. And this magnificent career, right? $300 million of real estate would not have come out of it if I had at that point, not stopped saying that's not my job, right? At some point I did stop it because internally I was excited. Oh, I get to build a custom campus for my company, but I was also afraid of making mistakes. And boy, did we make lots and lots of mistakes. But, that's part of learning, right? If you don't make any mistakes, you're not going to learn.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, even as a leader, sometimes you have to figure out how to lead the people that are supposed to be following you. Because, for me, I'm kind of one of these leaders where I give somebody direction. I say, go make it happen. And I kind of just expect you to make mistakes. Like, I know it's going to happen, but there's followers where they're just kind of like, they're afraid to make that first move because they're afraid to make a mistake. And they just need to be given that little push and that little nudge sometimes to say, you know what, like, if you mess up, it's okay. I've got your back, but like, I still want this done. So I need you to take that first step forward. That's awesome. So what do you do now? Like, you kind of told us about your story, about how you got to where you are now, but so what position do you hold now, and kind of what does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. So I own two companies. Grow Capitus buys and builds multifamily, student housing, industrial properties, and self-storage properties, right? The portfolio is a little over 300 million. We have about 500 investors that are invested in the portfolio. It's in 10 states in the US. And we enjoy kind of having our feet in two boats. Normally, it's not, most companies in the US like us are either on the developer side, they're building stuff, or they're on the value add side where they're improving stuff. And we're sort of half and half. Half of our portfolio is value add, the other half is new construction. And we sort of enjoy that. And I think that construction piece obviously came out of my experience with building campuses. I did end up building more than one. So we ended up working on 6 campuses over an extended period of time, 10 years. And so that's what I do for a living. What I have fun with is this second company called Multifamily University. And Multifamily University started off as a place where people that were interested in apartments could go and learn every potential aspect from a bunch of geeks. As you can imagine, given I'm a geek, I tend to gather other geeks around me. So people that were very kind of knowledge driven and data driven would come onto my platform, everything from lawyers to rehabbers to, the folks that basically are playing some huge role in multifamily with large portfolios, and they'd come onto my platform. And then eventually we realized we need to expand this because people really had started associating multifamily with commercial, and it's not really a commercial asset. And so we started talking about student housing and senior housing and storage and mobile home parks and, and all those kinds of asset classes, industrial. And so eventually Multifamily University sort of transformed into a place for all things commercial and multifamily. Now we do about 20 to 30 deep dive webinars each year, and over 30,000 people a year sign up for those webinars and watch them.
Wow, that's amazing. So you do 20 to 30 webinars. How long are these webinars?
They're usually about 75 minutes long. They're pretty deep dive. So there's a lot of content to go through and a lot of questions at the end. So because there's, usually 500 can never be more than 500 because our Zoom license is 500. So there's usually 500 people. And then 5 minutes before the session starts, we start sending out Facebook links for those that didn't make it so they can watch on Facebook Live. So we get a lot of questions. We get about 30 minutes of questions and 45 minutes for content.
That's very interesting. So right now you kind of have like this two-prong thing, two kind of major big businesses. The one is Grow Capitus, which you said you're building student housing and self-storage, but you're also, I'm assuming,
and multifamily.
Multifamily, right? So you also have the multifamily, residential type of properties that people live in, and that everybody's going to need, to live in at some point. I do think that this year is one of those years where I still love self-storage. I'm kind of nervous to kind of see some of my buddies that are in the student housing, how that's going to be affected this year. It's probably going to be a very great opportunity to be a buyer this year in student housing, but definitely something that's always been really, really good, at least for the last 10 years, to my knowledge. But then you also kind of have this education piece, basically. Is the education piece just the webinars, or are you doing live events as well?
We do live events. We teach boot camps to about 400 students a year that are looking to get into apartments. So they want to get into syndication and buy a 200, 300 unit property for 20 or $30 million. They need coaching and they need specific instruction on how to make the legal structures work, how to raise the money, how to asset manage the properties. So we teach boot camps 4 times a year, and we usually teach them in the cities that we have assets in. So that way, when we do the bus tours, we're actually going out to one of our assets and we show students, okay, this is where we started. Here's the occupancy, here's the profit. And now let's show you where we are today. And we'll also show you a little bit about our path on that way, which, as you can imagine, is not always up, right? So it's sometimes up and down and up and down, and then hopefully back up for those properties. So, we teach those 4 times a year. Obviously, at this moment, they're all virtual. So we're teaching the boot camps virtually, which has been shocking because the student count has gone up a lot, once we started teaching them post-COVID.
Very, very, very interesting. It's awesome. So I'm assuming then these live events, if you're doing them kind of centered around maybe a live deal that you're working on, probably have to be in those certain particular areas. Are there areas of the country right now that you're targeting more than others for these types of projects that you guys are working on?
Yeah, and it's really tied back to my story. So so I go out and I build those campuses. I'm having fun. I'm saving money from a tax perspective. I had the big fat tax salary, so obviously, the tax savings were really welcome. And so what I started doing is, as I started getting fascinated with real estate, I looked at it saying, hey, I'm a data scientist. There must be other data scientists in real estate, and they must have these metrics on how to find the best properties in the US, what cities to invest in, what neighborhoods to invest in. There must be benchmarks. And I looked for them, and I really didn't find high quality demographic benchmarks. So I started investigating and saying, you know what, maybe I can put this stuff together, right? So what I did was I then hired a Ukrainian hacker. I had him basically spider the Zillow website, spider the Census Bureau website, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we basically put together demographic data on every major city in the US, 3,300 cities. And then we basically started looking at how much profit people were making doing real estate, single family or multifamily in those cities, and started correlating. What causes a huge amount of profit? What creates an all ships rising effect? What makes life easy for a real estate investor? And we found that there were some metrics that were much more important than others. And so we created a system, and I call it the Real Focus system. The goal was to give the system away for free. I don't even get people's email address when they use the Real Focus system. It was meant to always be given away for free and improved. And there's about 40, 50,000 people using the system. But in a nutshell, what the system is it's a set of 5 metrics for picking out the best cities in the US for real estate investing, and a set of 5 metrics for picking out the best neighborhoods in those cities. As you can imagine, the best cities have awful neighborhoods. So just because you pick a great city to invest in doesn't mean that you're going to pick a great neighborhood. So the 5 metrics for cities were population growth, a certain amount of population growth. People might say, of course it makes sense, you invest in places that have population growth. The question is how much, right? Population growth, job growth, income growth, home price growth, and crime reduction. We found that these were the 5 big ones, and it's counterintuitive that schools are not in there. But what we found was when we put schools in there, we ended up with the same list of cities. So we took schools out, right? Because we were getting to the same exact place, and we wanted to keep the system very simple. So once I created the system, I then went and researched the neighborhood part of it and created another 5 metrics for neighborhoods. And then I put the system together. It's called Real Focus, and I'll tell your listeners how to get to it. And what I did was I put it on a website, and I was highly disappointed because I was like, this is incredibly powerful. Everybody that takes me tells me it's the best real estate course they've ever taken, and they can't believe it's free. But there's only like 100 or 200 people taking it every year. I want more people to take it. And so I sent an email to all of my community, and I said, hey, this is a great course. Look at these reviews. People absolutely love it. How do I get like 10, 15, 50,000 people to take it? And somebody came back with an answer and said, you're using your own website. Stick it on udemy.com, udemy.com, which is, the biggest provider of online courses. And I'm like, okay, well, there's no harm. So I recorded the course as high definition videos and step-by-step instructional videos. And I put it on Udemy, and I was like, if I get another 200 people a year, I'm going to be really happy. And it just exploded. I mean, it just went completely supernova. If you go to udemy.com/realfocus, that's udemy.com/realfocus, one word, you'll see that right now there are 6,000 people taking the course. It is the most popular real estate course on udemy.com. It is the highest rated course on udemy.com. So it has 500 5-star ratings. People have loved it. And so by giving those metrics away to the general population, I didn't create money in the short term. In fact, because there was no business model, right? There was no upscale selling. It wasn't like $50. There was no CDs, tapes, books. It was just a free course from a geek who didn't even do real estate. He was in technology, right? He's a tech guy. He's like, this is how I buy properties, and maybe you should look into it too, right? So it was a very straightforward, candid sort of thing. So I didn't end up any money initially, but I ended up making millions of dollars from it later because it created this micro community of geeks and dorks, assorted geeks and dorks throughout the US who are like, I love what this guy is doing. I'm going to follow him. And so this community coalesced around me. And when it was time for me to we sold our technology company, had a wonderful, exit. And once I was done with that, I was like, okay, I've been using these metrics and this dashboards and the systems to buy my own properties. By that time, I'd bought 16 or 17 properties of my own, and showing it to people. Why don't I try this for multifamily and see if it works for a 200 unit instead? But I didn't have enough money to buy a 200 unit. So I was like, maybe people will invest with me. All these people that I've got in my database, and they did. So it was a very easy transfer to go from being a technologist in a tech company to being a real estate syndicator, buying and building $300 million, because there was this incredible base of knowledge that had been built up through the Real Focus system.
Well, not only did you build a base of knowledge, you also really built a base of a network that you didn't even do on purpose. You just were trying to help people. And that's really, that's the go-giver spirit. You go out and you give as much as you possibly can, and you help enough other people get what they want. Eventually, like, you get what you want and then some, and you can't even take it all in. We haven't talked about any challenges yet. And, I always love to hear people's stories. I always love to hear about people's successes, but I always think that a lot of times the audience always learns the most from people's challenges. I do want to go back though and just refocus, and I will make sure that if you guys are watching this on Facebook, or if you guys are watching this on LinkedIn, we will link that udemy.com / it's Real Focus, correct? And we will link that, but I wanted to kind of re-say that before we went any farther. But in the end, when you help enough other people get what they want, you actually always end up getting what you want. So, I really appreciate that focus, that you've done that, but there has to have been some bumps in the road. So, we always love to hear the people's biggest challenge that they're willing to give us, and kind of how they came through it and what they learned from it. So what has been your biggest challenge up to this time? And, and how did you get through that?
I think the biggest challenge was my first property. So, first property, I learned something interesting in this property. So we bought this property on the south side of Chicago, right? And the property was a few hundred yards away from where President Obama was building his $2 billion presidential library, right? And he was slated to start building it around 2017. And I was like, wow, this is not a library. I mean, Obama's a very popular president. People in Chicago love him, and he has all this money. So he's going to build this annex, with restaurants and multifamily, and of course this huge library. And he's already got land, and I'm buying a property that's basically, like 300-400 yards away. And then, as I was evaluating the property, Tiger Woods, who's a friend of the Obama, said, I'm going to buy South Shore Golf Club, and I'm going to turn it into a championship golf course with my name on it. I was like, wow, that's great. And then I did some more research, and the richest family in Chicago, the McCaffreys, had bought the massive U.S. Steel, land, which is on the lake. And so it's a huge area, right? It's an enormous factory that's been abandoned for about 60, 70 years. And they'd bought it, and they'd spent $55 million paying for a freeway exit into that area. And so obviously this was pretty advanced, and they wanted to build 12,000 homes there. So I looked at that, and I made a mistake, right? And my mistake was that I said, the area as it stands today, its quality is not high. But given that a president is building this, a superstar athlete is building that, Chicago's richest family is building this, I think that the quality will improve and all ships will rise. And the mistake that I made was that you can't assume tomorrow will come and pick up a property that's not ready today. And guess what happened? The Friends of Jackson Park sued the Obama Presidential Library and held it up for 4 years before it was approved. Uh, and Tiger said, look, until the library is built, I'm not building my golf course. The McCaffreys got into an argument with the city of Chicago, left their $55 million and walked away from the whole project. And at this point, it's still not built. So now, you know, I was left with a property and an area with a tenant base that was distressed, that was challenging, that was problematic. All kinds of bad things could happen, and all kinds of bad things did happen. A year after our purchase, in one day in South Shore, which is a small neighborhood, there were 3 shootings, separate shootings, 7 people died. Within the next 2 months, we lost 15% of our occupancy. The property was upside down. We were not able to pay our mortgage. So what did we do? I mean, it was all hands on deck. So I showed up in Chicago. My partner, who was a brilliant guy named John Mark, he showed up in Chicago, and we lived there. We basically rented an Airbnb down the street from our property, and we started living there. My job was to generate lead flow. So I went back to my Ukrainian hacker and I said, here's this property. I need to get like thousands of leads here. Nobody wants to live here at this point in time because of all the problems that are happening. So I need a very large amount of lead flow. Like imagine if I need 50 leads a month, well, this property, I need 500 a month. Hire whoever you want, but let's get the lead flow. And so he hired people that would write scripts and go into apartments.com and Zillow.com and Trulia.com and basically somehow get our posting more visible. We wrote dozens of Craigslist ads. We went into the Go Section 8 website and hacked that so that we had a piece of software clicking on the refresh button every 15 minutes to get our ad up and running. I mean, we did so much stuff. And then every single lead that was coming in, I was the phone call guy. I was making phone calls. So I made over 3,000 phone calls. I scheduled about 500 people at the property, signed about 30 leases to get us to the point where the property was breaking even. And that person, and then I hired a Filipino person, her name's Michelle, and I've had her for 4 or 5 years for this property now. She's been there. She's then taken on those leads. She's processed it. The property as of today is about 93% occupancy, and we're close to selling it at this point. So, I mean, really what it came down to is that when you run up against these kinds of challenges, you have to be prepared to completely disrupt your life. And that's what this property did. It completely made a mess of my life for months and months on end. And I and my partner were willing to give that up. He even more so than I did, but we were willing to do what was necessary, to be phone salespeople if necessary, to make that property work.
What a great example of what I think is real true leadership there. And, what most people would have done, and I've been in real estate and I've been in business for 20 plus years, and I can tell you what most people would have done, Neal, is they would have blamed Obama, or they would have blamed Chicago, or they would have blamed the McCaffreys, or they would have blamed Tiger Woods, or they would have blamed the shootings, and they would have just like cried and said, poor pitiful me. And I even think this year it's a great example about what a lot of people are going through some tough times in 2020. I get it. Trust me. And you can either blame everybody else and focus on all the blame and all the things that have gone wrong, or you can pull up your sleeves, completely disrupt your business, your life, if you have to, and do whatever it takes to make it work. And even somebody like Neal, you said 2017, that wasn't very long ago. That was just 3 short years ago. And you probably were there for at least a year, I think you said. So you completely moved your family, or moved yourself at least, and said, hey, I'm going to make this happen. It's going to happen whether or not, we're sink or swim. We're not going to sink. We're going to swim. We're going to make this happen. And, that's what true leadership does. And I really appreciate that, that story. And I really appreciate what you did, because we need more of that in America. And, I think a lot of times people look at the business owners and they look at the successful people and they think that we just had this handed to us, just all of a sudden, like we just grew up and we had money and it just automatically happened. And I'm like, no, every single person that has been successful, I mean, you got 300 units and for 300, I think you have 2,200 units or something like that. You guys say, I think you have here, but you have 300 different complexes and you have 300 investors that you're investing their money. I mean, a lot of people would look at you as being super successful, but even though even though you were maybe super successful with all these other projects, you had this massive issue and you said, you know what? I need to step up and I need to do whatever it takes to make this happen. And I really, that was a blessing to hear. I hope the audience that is listening to this really pays attention to that and know sometimes you got to do what it takes. And it's years like this year right now. And honestly, that's why I wrote the book right away, how to survive this pandemic. And most of it is exactly what he said. You've got to be prepared. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to focus and be data driven. Data is one of those I think it's one of those 6 or 7 keys of business. If you don't have good data, like you can't make good decisions. So I love that. Thank you so much for giving that to our audience. And that was just really such a blessing to me, because I love hearing successful people and their story of how they had to work hard and how they had to actually do whatever it took to make it happen. So it kind of leads great into this next question. I love to ask the guests on the podcast, and that's, why do you do what you do? So why? Like, why did you go to Chicago, the South Side of Chicago? And I'm not too far from Chicago, just so you know. I'm only about an hour where I sit right now, about an hour, and I'm in Indiana. So to me, it's like, we're very peaceful over here. You guys a lot of people are seeing all of the shootings and all the things that are going right now in South Side of Chicago. And yeah, it is a mess. It is not good. I will tell you that, and we're over here, and it's like, as soon as things come over here, it's like a wall. Things stop when people, could come to Indiana. We're open carry state, and that probably has something to do with that. There's a lot of people here that think a little bit differently, than they do in Chicago. But I will say, like, we've been able to benefit from that, honestly. Like for me, these secondary cities that are outside of these messes, outside of Portland, outside of New York, outside of Chicago, outside of these, even Seattle, like people love to move like just an hour or 2 hours away from where they may work or where they're kind of used to. But really, so why did you do that? Like, why do you do what you do? And, what made this so important that you said, hey, I'm going to go live there and make this happen?
I think one of the challenges of having the big fat tech salary is that all of these, peers of mine that make 300 grand a year or thereabouts in the San Francisco Bay Area, we're all completely paranoid. And the fear that we have, which is very irrational actually, is that one day our bosses are going to say, instead of paying 300 grand to this guy, I'm just going to hire 3 young guns at, 100 grand each or 80 grand each and replace him, and I'll get more value out of it. And so we're always thinking that. And as a result, when we are in technology, we work insanely hard. We work crazy, crazy hours and Saturdays and Sundays and really get burned out by it. And this is very common, right? I mean, young doctors get burned out in the same way because you're working way, way beyond your capacity, but you're doing it because you have a point to prove on an ongoing basis to justify that massive salary. And when I started doing real estate and when cash flow started coming to me, and my cash flow was like $10,000 a month, which is still, a small amount compared to my salary, but it didn't really matter. What mattered was one day I simply stopped worrying about what would happen if my boss replaced me. As it turned out, my boss loved me and, never replaced me. And we went through, 15 years in a technology company and had a successful exit that I had stock in. So none of those bad things happened. But real estate, the gift that it gave me was this peace of mind that if one day something bad should happen, number one, my mortgage and my base expenses were all paid for by real estate cash flow. And number two, I had the ability to generate more money in real estate in the future. And that assurance that it gave me really changed my life. I became a different person. I started thinking in a different way. And what I realized was that not everybody has the ability to go out and buy 10 single family homes and do all of those things and go to banks and do some of the things that I did. But I think everybody deserved that peace of mind that I got from real estate and the cash flow. So I said, how can I give 100 other people or 1,000 other people this peace of mind? So the initial goal was, how do I take technologists that are working 14 hours a day in the San Francisco Bay Area and make their life a little bit more fruitful by giving them cash flow? So they're not as paranoid, not as crazy, and they work 12 hours a day instead of 14. And that was the starting point, right? And you kind of laugh at that. You go, oh, so you're trying to get him from 14 a day to 12 a day? And the answer is yes. Trust me, that 2 hour difference is a huge quality of life difference, right?
Absolutely.
That's how I got
I feel
started.
you.
And so the first, out of the first 100 investors, I think probably 80 were technologists and doctors. And so those people did come back to me and say, hey, we really feel great that you're buying and building these beautiful buildings. You're taking care of it. You send us this enormous update every month with videos and pictures, and you tell us about dogs biting tenants and tenants biting dogs, and all these kinds of things. And it makes us feel like we are there dealing with these problems, but not so much. We just get to read this monthly update and enjoy the paychecks. And so I became addicted to people telling me that I was making a difference in their life. And so it sort of grew from there. Now, of course, we have investors that are in all parts of the US and they do all kinds of different things. But it really started with me trying to improve the work life of my fellow technology brethren. And I think that was a noble cause.
Yeah, I really can connect with that and really, agree with that wholeheartedly. At some point you get to the point where you're totally fine. You're financially free, and there has to be a reason to go on. And, one of my biggest fears through COVID and one of my biggest fears at any given time is not necessarily like, am I going to be okay? It's like, I want to make sure that I'm in it for my investors, and I want to make sure that I make it work for them because they're relying on me. I'm trying to help them. I haven't promised, because there is no guarantee in investing. And when you do make an investment, you have to understand that there is risk in that. And I know I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm not promising it, but I am trying my absolute hardest to make sure that the investors that invest with us and buy our rental properties or loan us money or do deals with us are going to get the best experience that they possibly can. So I can definitely connect with that. I love that. I love having the people that you serve as being your purpose, because you're really, I've seen this with many different groups. I've seen this in a dentist group. I've seen this in a lawyer's group. I've seen this in a contractor's group, where they kind of grew up, they learned some things themselves, and then they want to go back to that group of people where they came from, and they really want to help them learn what they learned. And I love your story. Thank you, Neal, for that. So, we always love to try to promote to the people on the audience and the things that they have going on. You've done this a little bit already, and that's totally fine. If you want to repeat that, we can go over that again. But what exciting project do you have working on right now? Do you have some buildings that you're looking for investors in, or do you have some things on the education side that you'd like to promote?
Well, we're blessed that we currently don't have any projects open for investment, but we do have a lot of upcoming projects. And what we are blessed to have is We have construction projects and because of the Real Focus system, we've figured out some of the most amazing cities in the US to invest in, places you really haven't thought of that much. Boise, Idaho, Provo, Utah, right? Houston near the university. You know, like there's properties like Dalton, Georgia, places like Dalton, Georgia. And like, where the heck is Dalton, Georgia? Well, it's actually not serving any part of Georgia. It's serving the Chattanooga Metro in Tennessee, and is a phenomenal place to invest in because of all of the all ships rising effect that creates. So we look at these amazing places, St. George, one of the fastest growing cities in the US, and we have projects running there, both new construction and value add on an ongoing basis. And you can see them all on our website, which is growcapitus.com, GROCAPITUS.com. I can't tell you that I have an open project because one of the things that we're blessed with our investor group is most of our projects are sold out within 48 hours of them being announced. And the ones that are not are sold out that week. And so we don't have any open projects. We're always happy to bring in more investors so that we can scale as a company. I think what would be more interesting is for you to check out some of our content. You know, the easiest way to check out content is simply Google my name, Neal Bawa, Neal Bawa, Bawa. I happen to be the only Neal Bawa on the World Wide Web. I haven't found anybody else that's called Neal Bawa. So that's both a blessing and a curse, because one day if somebody says something nasty about it, me, hasn't happened yet, but it will, you're going to read about that too, right? So, and the way Google works, you know, if it's something nasty, it'll probably give it a higher rating. So it'll
Yeah,
probably
it'll go
link
really
number one.
fast. You know, who
That's right.
knows why that goes
Yes,
faster
like
than
Google
good
somehow
stuff.
intuitively knows that somebody's, you know, bashing Neal Bawa. But check out the word Neal Bawa. If you're interested in my data-driven methodologies, type in Neal Bawa Real Focus. If you're interested in how I use teams of virtual assistants to grow profits, I have 18 full-time virtual assistants. They function as team members. They work Pacific Standard hours. They work 8 to 10 hours a day, and they do everything in our company. There's no part of our company that virtual assistants don't do. They even have access to our bank accounts, read-only access, but they still have access to our bank accounts. You know, when you invest $100,000, our senior most virtual assistant is sending you a receipt. So bottom line is, if that's something that's interested, the use of virtual assistants to 10x your business, just type in Neal Bawa virtual assistants and you'll see content there about that. If you're in multifamily and you want to know how to improve the occupancy of your property, type in Neal Bawa Lasal, Lasal. Lasal is a 5-step high-speed leasing methodology that I invented a few years ago that has now become a standard in our industry. So check that out if you're interested in leasing up your multifamily. So those are, I think, some of the best ways to connect with us. If you would like to listen to webinars about senior housing, student housing, multifamily, you know, industrial, mobile home parks, those webinars are all at multifamilyu.com. That's multifamily followed by the letter u.com. As I mentioned, about 38,000 people a year attend our webinars.
That's amazing. It's awesome. You know, thank you so much for, you know, investing some time and investing into the Good Success community. I mean, you just kind of I wrote down a lot of those things, and hopefully, Amelia, you've caught that, and you'll kind of go through this, and a lot of those links in the links below here, in the comment section below here, or in the description of YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. But hopefully you guys will spend some more time. And I actually, for me, even myself, I even wrote down the Real Focus one to kind of even go back and kind of maybe watch that EDU course as well. So thank you again so much. So the other part of this. So if you're interested in the investment side, I know we do have a lot of investors that are listening to this, growcapitus.com, and I'm sure that there's some places that you can connect there if you are interested in being a future investor in one of his projects. But if you're looking on the education side, he kind of gave you a bunch of other things. And really, he just said, just start with Googling his name, Neal Bawa, Nealb. And right now he's the only mad scientist named Neal Bawa out there. So thank you so much for giving us your mad scientist look at real estate today, and kind of how you are helping a bunch of other people around the country. I really do appreciate that. We always ask everybody that comes on the show 2 more questions. And the first one's very important to us. It is all about our name. It's about good success. And for us, it's about having the right kind of success, not just, having a bunch of money, because really, who cares? You can't take it with you when you die. But for us, good success means a lot to us. So we always like to ask people that come on the show, what does good success mean to you? So when I say good success, what does that mean to you?
So we're every company has focuses, and our focus is that we are an investor focused company. I've seen some phenomenal companies in multifamily that are tenant focused. They want to build great communities. We want to do that too, but our focus is we are investor focused. And so when we have investors that come back to us and say, I feel like my money is safe with you, right? I understand that there is risk, but I feel that money is safe, and you're watching that money carefully. That is the definition of success. Not the highest returns, not the largest investor database, not the largest, portfolio, but a higher level of client satisfaction than our peers is what is good success.
That's great. I love that. I was doing an investor interview with one of my investors this last week with Jared, my CEO of Olson Group. And in the middle of that interview, the guy said, like, I've just come to the point where I trust you. And that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen like instantly. It happens because you've proven yourself, and that you've done what you said you're going to do, and that bad things happen, and you actually showed what you do when bad things happen and good things happened. And, you kind of knew what you were doing, and you kind of, led them the way. But trust is so important in business. One of my favorite books of all time when it comes to just life in general is The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And, it's so true. I love that. But having the investors that work with you trust you is just so important. I love that. And that's a great definition of having the right kind of success. Neal, I could probably go on and on for hours and hours and pick your brain and try to get the smoke to kind of come out of your brains from the mad scientist inside of you. And, you call yourself a geek, and maybe I'm a geek too. I don't know. I love studying spreadsheets. I actually think all of the world's problems can probably be solved in a spreadsheet. But a lot of people out there don't. My wife is the exact opposite. Like, if she has to look at a spreadsheet, her brain's going to be fried by looking at it. So we're exact opposites when it comes to that. But we always like to just kind of pull out whatever we possibly can, just get one more golden nugget from you, Neal, if you wouldn't mind, to the audience. So if you just had one thing to give to the audience, maybe it's a quote, a statement, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a life lesson, or maybe it's just something that you live by that you really want to get out to the world. What would that be? So what would that one thing be?
Sure. So I've only ever invented one quote in my life, but I think it's a good one. So I'll throw that one at you. So I say to people, the Bible got it wrong by one letter. The Bible got it wrong by one letter, because it is not the meek that shall rule the earth, people. It's the geek.
Ha!
It's the geek. Richest man in the world, geek. Second richest, geek. Third richest, geek. Do you see a pattern developing there, right? That's the truth. The world is being taken over by the geeks. You can call them meek. I don't think we are very meek, but we are taking over the world. And I think that, you look at 90% of the stock market's growth. It is in those top 6 technology companies. We know what they are: Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Apple. That's where 90% of the growth in the stock market has come from. Those companies and their associated technology companies. And I think that everyone needs to ask themselves, what does this mean for me? Because the world's changing.
And you're absolutely right. If you look at the top companies in the last, 10, 20 years, it's really completely changed. Those top companies used to be your Walmarts and used to be your, GE and those like just juggernauts that have just been at the top forever and ever and ever. And now this is who they are. They are Amazon. They are Microsoft. They are Apple. They are all Netflix. Who would have thought that a company like Netflix could even be where it is today? But yes, so the geek shall rule the world is the quote from Neal Bawa. There you have it, folks. Thanks again, Neal, for investing in our community. I really do appreciate your time and love to reconnect and kind of maybe stay connected and see if there's any way that we can help each other in the future. I'm definitely going to go to some of the courses and kind of see what we can do there as well and kind of learn from your experiences through the years. But I definitely want to just let you know that I appreciate your time and I appreciate you investing in our community. Thank you so much. So that's good. That's going to do it for today's episode, everybody. If this show has been a blessing to you, or if this show has been something that you've learned a lot, I'd love for you to share this with your friends. Let your friends know about the Good Success community. Let your friends even know about Neal. I'm going to probably get off this right now and text a couple of people and say, hey, like you need to check this guy out because there's some people that I know that are getting into multifamily and they're in a different industry now and they really need to kind of learn from somebody that's learned some of the hard things about what not to do, right? And learn from other people's mistakes instead of their own. But if you have learned from this podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share this, subscribe. And really, we are trying to do a big push right now to give reviews on the podcast. If you guys can go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review for that, that would be awesome as well. If you guys are interested in experiencing the power of the mastermind, we do have 4 live events each year. And I'm just going to make it super easy for you. If you just email me at sales@goodsuccess.com, we will get right back to you and see if you qualify for experiencing the power of the mastermind. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Remember to be a conduit, not a bucket. Work to have, to give. God bless. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Good Success Podcast, and we hope to see you on the next one. God bless.